The Callisto Protocol is a beautiful and stunning disappointment. I was personally extremely buzzing around the release of this game because since the death of the Dead Space IP, we've not really had anything like that come out since. The feeling that Dead Space used to give you when you moved through the hallways, you were low on ammo and an alien is running towards you ready to destroy you and tear you apart. Aiming for the limbs was one of your only hopes at destroying these enemies and their main weakness. The alt fire on the plasma cutter as well, allowing you to shoot vertically or horizontally. And the ability to not only rely on jump scares to make the player feel on edge. With Glen Schofield directing the Dead Space series, you would have thought that a lot of that philosophy would have been carried over to the Callisto Protocol. And that's definitely what Glen Schofield preached and how it sounded in some of the interviews and the pre-release trailers and things like that. But sadly, I don't think it has. But today we are reviewing the Callisto Protocol. Why the game in some cases gets it right and is just absolutely gorgeous. But on the other hand, why this game it has, in my opinion, really underachieved in every sense of the imagination. Now, before we go further, these are my personal thoughts. I look for more than just action and jump scares in single player games, and especially horror experiences. And for me, this game probably should have been much better. I personally really enjoyed my 7-hour playthrough, but I do think it lacked in areas which probably could have been avoided. You may agree in part with this video, but also there may be sections you disagree with, and that is absolutely fine. Leave your comments down below, and remember, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, because I know what some people can be like. But let's dive straight into the review of the Callisto Protocol. So, what makes a good video game story? A lot of game developers get it wrong when it comes to the story because they look more towards epic action, set pieces, and even overall design of the worlds in some cases. But unless your gameplay is near perfect, and that's the thing that carries you through the playthrough, then in some cases that might be okay. But having bad or non-engaging storytelling as well as pretty mid gameplay, it really drags through the playthroughs. Stories need you to feel emotionally attached to characters, give you a reason for wanting them to succeed in their objectives, care about their family or their loved ones or whatever their motivation may be, relate to their interests, and ultimately hate whoever's trying to harm them. To accompany this, any characters you meet along the way must make you want to like them by giving you a reason to like them. Freya in God of War is a good example. She's an extremely lovable character because she cares for us and Atreus, and saving him from the first game, and her motivations are very similar to that of Kratos. She has lost her son, and she doesn't want the same thing to happen to Kratos and Atreus with him not telling him that he's a god. Their motivations clash, and it makes that character want to do more for Kratos, and that makes obviously the player appreciate her more. Ellie from The Last of Us is a character that we learn to love like a daughter throughout the game. Johnson from Halo 2 is a character to add that comedic value throughout, and is ultimately a badass also. And the main antagonist. They have to be cool, their motivations need to be clear, and they must give you a reason to not like them, or disagree with their overall motivation. Ultimately, you need to care about the end goal. The whole idea of a story is for you, the player, to become interested and invested in that story, and want to accomplish the same goal as the characters in that game. The Callisto Protocol, in my opinion, did precisely none of this with its story or its characters. Now, the Callisto Protocol story was not terrible. I actually think the game's overall story had the potential to be very good, with a couple of additional tweaks and elements. But overall, it was really basic. Whether that was done on purpose to accommodate for DLC in the future, I don't really know. But if it was, I think it was the wrong decision from the team. With this being the first game in the IP, it needs to have a strong and engaging story that gets you hyped for potential new story DLC, which we know is confirmed in the Season Pass. But I never throughout felt connected to the story in any way at all. The characters all seemed very cookie cutter to me, and the main antagonist had really weak and strange motivations. In order for the player to become invested in the story, you need to feel a connection for those characters and have a reason to like them. Let's use an example here and paint a picture. Joel from The Last of Us. We start off by seeing Joel live a normal life with his little girl, to suddenly needing to flee the state, and then ultimately losing his daughter towards the end. We immediately connect with this character, making us care for him and understand his loss, and know why he is the way he is going forward. You establish a very early connection with Joel throughout. And then when it comes to meeting Ellie, you care for Ellie like Joel did with his daughter. Ellie becomes Joel's do-over, and you watch the bond connect between them both as you progress through the first game and even through the second one too. The Callisto Protocol, I don't feel like it has any of that throughout. That's my biggest issue with the game. We have the likes of Elias, Max and Danny throughout the game. Elias is a character that's been in the prison for over half his life, so of course we're using him to get out. We don't really know much about Elias at all, only that he was in for murder and that he's learnt from it, but that's really all we knew. We had no idea of his backstory, what he wanted to do when he escaped, or anything like that. Max dies within the first 10 minutes of the game and we never hear about him again from Jacob's perspective at all. Almost like Jacob has completely forgotten about Max, like he died for literally nothing. Jacob said at the start of the game to Max that they would never have to work again after the job that they were doing. But that was all we heard from that. No comment on what they wanted to do after, what aspirations they had after that point, their personal lives, family, where they're from, where they're returning to. There is nothing in this game or introduction to make me want to like these characters or relate to them in any way at all. Let's take this into perspective. In the very first cutscene, if Jacob had a picture of his family on the dashboard, his wife and 2 kids for example, the goal was to finish the mission, be set for life and retire with his family, bringing up his 2 girls with his wife on Europa or wherever it might be. However, he hears about the attacks on Europa and is worried, but before he gets back, he's ambushed by Danny and Bosch. They crash on Callisto. Turns out later on into the game, he's the person that's took this lava or vials to Europa and started it, and potentially he's the reason why his family have died or something like that. Like, this would be so much more engaging, and in 25 seconds of me saying that right now, I've given you an amazing motivation for Jacob to want to get revenge on this antagonist for making him do this. But we don't get any of that, and that's my biggest frustration with this game. And then of course there's Danny. I mean, she's a part of a terrorist group called Outer Way. Who is this group? Why were they wanted within Europa? They apparently made 6 attacks on the Europa moon in the last 6 months. What were these attacks? Where were they? Were they really bad? Did they steal a chocolate bar? Like, what did they do? If Jacob, Max, Danny and Elias had more reasons for us to care about them in game, it would have been a much more interesting playthrough and an interesting story, and we would have wanted more for these characters throughout. But really, I didn't know what we were fighting for from the beginning, you know? Like, I don't know what these characters are missing out on being falsely imprisoned, or what's Max missing out on, like, being killed in that crash. This just it's frustrating, really, and I'm annoyed that this wasn't fleshed out because it would have made the story 20 times better. And then of course we get the main antagonist. If you look at the definition of an antagonist in the dictionary, it would explain this guy for word. Warden Duncan Cole never shows up in game properly. Even at the end of the game where he looks real, he is a hologram. His motivations are that humanity don't belong in space, and that our bodies cannot cope with the travel in space or expanding outside of these moons. So he wants to accelerate their evolution to allow us to be bigger and stronger, and to allow us to travel across space without the need for any additional technology or gear. Look, I think that part of the story is very weak and a bit naff really, but the actual story plot had so much potential. An alien found buried in the moon of Callisto by a bunch of colonist miners is brought up to the surface, and millions of its lavas infect those miners. They all start turning into these things, and that's when they're just trapped down there for years, around 75 years it was mentioned in the game. This is what caused the outbreak, and it was covered up. A facility was built on top of the mine to study these species, and it was led by Dr. Marla. And Duncan Cole, a crazy person, just hears about this and decides to build a prison on top of this facility for endless test subjects. Look, this story had so much potential and it sounds like a really good story, but there are just some elements of it that just make it really weak, and the surrounding characters that we have in-game from Jacob just are not strong enough for me. Overall, the story for Callisto Protocol was not terrible. The overall plot was actually quite good in a way, but the characters lack depth, that emotional connection between the player and them. If there was more time from the writers put into making these characters interesting, relatable and likeable, and even giving us more characters throughout, this would be a much more engaging game for me, and I would probably not be as harsh on it as what I am right now. If there was an award in video games for the best graphical fidelity and looks, it would 100% be awarded to the Callisto Protocol in a heartbeat. This game is one of the best looking video games I've ever played in my entire life. The skybox, the atmosphere, the overall ambience and designs of the hallways and all around levels is so stunning to me. The developers over at Striking Distance need to be really proud of themselves with what they've done here. Even the ambience of the music, how it makes you feel going into that psych ward at the end of the game, near the end of the playthrough. My heart was actually starting to race going through that psych ward. It was just the ambience going through, understanding what the psych ward is and knowing that it's typically a little bit crazier than the normal parts of the prison. It was really fun, and they're the parts of a horror game that you really enjoy. However, unfortunately, that's all I can really give a lot of credit about to this game, other than the actual baseline plot. If looks could carry a game, I'd have hoped that it would be this one, but even the stunning visuals can't cover this game's overall flaws. You only really start to pick up on the flaws of this game around 4 to 5 hours into the playthrough. The repetitiveness of the enemy interactions, the god-fucking awful combat system, the reusing of mini-bosses around 4 times throughout the game as well, and one of the worst final boss fights that I've ever played in my life. Look, the linear level design doesn't really bother me a whole lot. Some of my favourite games in the past have all been very linear games. If you are going to follow that route, you need to make exploring those linear levels fun. Gears of War 2 does this fantastically well. A very heavy linear game. However, it will give you the odd room or route that you can choose where you want to go. Left or right, above or below, and give you that choice as well. Even Gears of War 5, a very linear game in its nature, but even sometimes gives you that odd open world level that you can tackle different objectives how you want to and do this in different ways. This game misses that, and with modern gaming evolving, I think that's a necessity now in linear level design. It just generally increases the game's overall replayability, and it makes it way more interesting to choose how to progress these different sections. But this game felt like it was on rails the entire way. You're in one very long corridor until you reach the very end of the game, and that's honestly how it felt, just with cutscenes breaking things up. Just keep pushing the stick forward and eventually you will finish this game. There's no backtracking to places that you've been to before. There's no interesting puzzles in the game that you can actually put some effort into trying to complete. Only find the fuse, take it out of the box, and put it into the other fuse box to open the door, which is repeated close to 10 times and is the only puzzle throughout. For me personally as well, the collectibles were all a bit meh. Only audio logs throughout the entirety of the game, no notes, messages, nothing else like that was left around. Some of the audio logs were very good, obviously giving you more details around the lore and stuff like that, and listening to Marla's and Duncan Cole's audio logs and stuff were very interesting, but also you had some from the different guards and stuff like that as to how they died and what they were doing at that time, but having some more from the prisoners, having more from the scientists working closely on these projects would have been cool. But unfortunately these audio logs never really gave us much more information than what we already knew from the story. The mini boss fights as well, god, they were just not very fun, and I think that was due to the awful combat mechanics, to be honest. And two, you just literally need to stand there and dodge them the entire time, and that is literally all you do. This brings me nicely onto the section around the game's combat mechanics though. Just, they're just not good. They're not good, guys. They're really not. The Callisto Protocol has a dodge feature that turns you into prime Muhammad Ali. We just have to hold the left and right stick, doesn't really matter which way, it can be any way, and Jacob will just dodge it there and then. You do have a light and a heavy attack, but over time they start to become useless due to the strength of the enemies increasing. And then of course the weapons. They personally I think feel pretty good and I enjoyed using them. But it's when you run out of ammo with one of those weapons and you try to change it mid-fight. You are absolutely shagged by the animation, which takes about 14 years to change to another weapon. This for me ruins the gameplay loop. It's not that I'm dying from the enemies because they're better than me or because I'm not doing something correctly. It's because I can't change my damn weapon without standing still for 7 seconds to wait for him to cock the weapon off its grip and then put the new one on. I can't reload my weapon and dodge at the same time, or sprint and reload my weapon either. You are so limited to doing 1 or 2 things at a time in this game, and it just does not suit the way this game was designed. Look, Dead Space was a game where it kind of wanted you to be a little bit more tactical in the way that you played. You, the player, did not feel very powerful compared to the monsters. You were the underdog in that situation. You had to aim for the limbs, stomp on the enemies to ensure that they were dead, and they wouldn't all bum rush you at once like they do in this game. The Callisto Protocol does the opposite of that. There are sections of this game where I can get upwards of 14 blind monsters around me. I hit one of these monsters, it alerts another, but somehow the other 12 blind monsters know exactly where I am all of the time until I kill them all. Like, how is that possible? There's no other way of escaping these blind monsters hiding in cover and then trying to redo that section. It is a case of, if you don't do it first time, you are absolutely shagged and you've got no choice but to run and try and kill them. They surround, smother you, and it's not even a tactical thing to be quiet all the time, it's just fucking bullshit. I can't change weapons in this situation. I try to use my melee, but the combat is not designed to kill 14 enemies at once, so I end up having to run away and try and hide. I can't heal myself in combat either, so unless I'm lucky and find a health thing that I can pick up that grants you instant health, I'm really screwed. I'm always forced to run through a door, re-heal with this injection gun which takes around 8 seconds, and then rush back and try and kill the rest of the enemies and rinse and repeat. Not to mention the repetitiveness of opening crates at the end of the game and these things just jumping out and trying to bite you all the time, spamming Y to get them off. I was literally walking around at the end of this game predicting that one of these things would jump out every time I opened these crates, and almost 9 times out of 10 they did every time. And then these things, they were fun at first, but the 18th time that I walk around a corner and they get me is so boring. The thing is though, they're scripted to happen. Get this, my game crashed in one of these sections, so I already knew that this was coming. I didn't even fully walk around the corner, and the audio cue had already started. But the thing is though, these audio cues start so late that you hear them and you think, oh shit, there's one of these things around the corner, but by the time you've tried to react, they're already clambering onto the side of your neck. The repetitiveness of these different things are really what made this game more tiresome towards the end. But finally, the big finale, that boss fight. Skip to the timestamp on screen right now if you don't want to listen to this section or don't want this to be spoiled. This boss fight was awful, guys. One of the laziest boss fights I've seen in a very long time, and just really unnecessarily difficult at times too. So it starts with Ferris walking towards you, trying to hit you. So we dodge left and right. Literally a carbon copy of the same encounter we had around 2 hours earlier into the game. Ferris then transforms into some huge beast, and all we really do is shoot the monster, dodge and run away to prevent being hit by these fireball things that it shoots out. Shoot a few crawlers on the way, and rinse and repeat. There's no stages to this boss fight, there's no health bar to this boss fight, kinda just finish it when you've dealt enough damage in the background. It was so anticlimactic to kill this boss that it actually shocked me when I'd finished it. This is my initial reaction after finishing the boss fight. I love it. What a shit boss fight, fuck me. Healing is pretty much a no-go in this fight too, due to how long it takes for you to inject this gun into your neck, so you're forced to run around the edges to look for drops that hopefully will spawn from these crawlers. Look, overall guys, the combat in this game is not it, and to be honest, it makes it a really unenjoyable game when you're further into it, and it made me really want this game to just be over around 6 hours in. I hate to say it, but it really did. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below though. In summary, the Callisto Protocol is one of the most beautiful video games I've personally ever played and ever seen. It will go down as one of the best looking video games that I've ever seen, and I'll remember it for that. But what I won't be remembering it for is its lackluster story, boring, uninteresting and shallow characters, and that god-awful combat system. The Callisto Protocol needed at least another 6 months of development to iron out these features. If combat was improved, creating a character that wasn't as strong as your enemies, and making you the underdog like it was in the Dead Space franchise, would have made this game 150 times better. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, it wasn't really a game for me, but hey, this game is getting a DLC, so I'm hoping the developers take this criticism on board and improve going forward on that DLC. That's going to be it for today's video, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below of this game, and if you agree with any of the points. If you don't, that's absolutely fine, but let me know your comments down below. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, so let me know yours down below. But leave a like on the video if you have enjoyed, subscribe if you guys are brand new, and we'll see you all in the very next one.